Several years ago, we had a success story which fits right into your question, Senator. A tour bus operator who brings tourists from Australia, and they do an extended tour through Glacier National Park, visiting Montana and going down to Yellowstone, stop by to visit just to see Grand Course Ranch, and after finding what a gem this was, they now regularly schedule their tour bus routes coming through here. They contact us before the buses come through. They stop in Deer Lodge, and this is basically their restroom stop. They let the buses, sometimes 2-3 buses at a time, unload here in Deer Lodge. And not only do they visit Grand Course Ranch, they go down Main Street, they go to the brew pub, they have pizza at the pizza place, and it actually is a wonderful opportunity. And we find that the Australian tourists love American ranching history, so it's a perfect marriage just by having that one visit of the tour bus company recognizing, oh, there's a brown sign, it's a national park, and I'm getting the same experience here that I would get at Yellowstone or Glacier.
Of course, those Aussies, that's the land of the man from the Snowy River, right? And I think about some of our visitors are coming from overseas, perhaps a little north of Australia, and how that Montana cowboy mystique that everybody knows about, it seems like, would just be a tremendous attraction for here to experience that, the way you present it so well with our heritage here in Montana. I want to shift over here to the Commissioner Cratchey. Thanks for your testimony again, and kind of laying out the perspective here on the economics and how, as a commissioner, the challenge you face of making everything balance as providing services for in-county government. According to the Park Service, visitors to the parks in the state of Montana spent $633 million in our local gateway communities last year. For Grand Cours, they identified about $1.6 million for this park. Could you elaborate on the importance of that number to Powell County and what it might mean if we were to continue growing that number year over year?
Well, thank you, Senator. All the tourists that come in, if they stop, like Jackie mentioned, with the buses coming in and going down Main Street, and any of the tourists that visit or spend any money at any of the local businesses obviously wind up helping both the city and the county by creating jobs, by employment, and you can see that by looking at the town. We have a brewery that's opened in just the last couple of years. They're seem to be doing well. You look out by the interstate where we have a McDonald's, the new hospital, I-90 convenience store, the one across the street. There's a Indian Creek campground right there. That's been some expansion going on in that area. Not that it's all related to tourism, but tourism does have a major impact on the city and the county. And like I said, bringing the more tourists we can get in, or even people just to come off the interstate and fill up a car with gas and spend money, is going to help the overall general economy. Okay.
Anything else want to say? Okay, great.
I'm going to go over to talk again a question from Mr. Jenkins. I mentioned earlier in my opening remarks about the deferred maintenance challenge we face across our national parks. We've got the spreadsheet for here at Grand Course that number is about $5.4 million. Yep. And I think for sake of those who may not be in the weeds of what we look at on deferred maintenance, this can be not just the things you see kind of on the storefront when you walk around a beautiful area like this, but it's sometimes the lesser known parts we employ: housing, water and sewer systems. They're absolutely essential to allow these parks to continue. So it's about $5.4 million here at deferred maintenance. That's not as large as some other parks in Montana. I'm working with Cam Shawley and Jeff Now, and Jack, you're now my next best friend here, the superintendency of the parks. I love it. This is great. It's still a significant number, $5.4 million here. How does that total impact the visitor experience here at this site by again, not addressing the issue of deferred maintenance?
Again, let me answer part of this question and then have Jackie speak specifically. So, as you mentioned, it's a little over $5 million here in deferred maintenance for Grand Corps, $586 million for Yellowstone that CAM is dealing with there, in between at Glacier. It's $325 million, I believe, is the total across the state. Yellowstone is kind of counting a large part in Wyoming. And that maintenance backlog is critical because, as you said, it is everything from the things that you don't see, the water and wastewater and electrical system. So relating it to your home, it would be like your septic system or connection to the sewer or your well, to employee housing and the roofs to trails. About half of all of the deferred maintenance is in roads, the very way that people want to be able to access the park, whether that is Yellowstone or Grand Corps. And so making progress on addressing the deferred maintenance is fundamental to meeting our mission for providing a high-quality visitor experience. Everything from being able to drive, hike, get information at the visitor center, spend a night in a campground or a lodge, and all of the other support structure. But let's learn a little bit about what the story is here.
So the deferred maintenance story here, as Chip mentioned, about half of it is roads, which for us means the access that we use to get to our cultural landscape and our fields, taking care of our fields, which actually double as hiking trails that tie into the county's hiking trails. So being able to maintain those and keep those in good condition is of paramount importance. The other aspect of the deferred maintenance is the fact that this is a historic site. So every time you do maintenance on a historic structure, you have to follow Secretary of Interior standards. It's not as inexpensive as it would be if it was modern buildings. We have to use historic techniques, so it's always more expensive. So whenever you're thinking about maintenance for a building like this, you're thinking about using the traditional methods. You're thinking about using whitewash in the traditional recipes. So it is more expensive, and it actually makes the visitor experience more realistic and more authentic.
Great, thank you. And I couldn't agree more. And one of the good news that you hear a lot about the polarization, the divides in Washington, D.C. I think if more Americans saw some of the good work going on between Democrats and Republicans working together here on the deferred maintenance, I think it'd warm everybody's hearts. We need to produce an outcome here, but there's a lot of genuine bipartisan support to address this very important issue. So look forward to staying in contact with you as well, Superintendent.
Absolutely.
As you think about, I'm hoping we're going to see a bill here moving through here pretty soon, so
Fantastic.
keep pushing on it. Ms. Bannon, thank you for being here as well today. You know as well as anyone that tourism is a pillar of our economy here in Montana. Outdoor recreation, by some estimates, suggests it's a $7 billion economic driver here in Montana. One of our biggest draws, of course, is our unmatched scenery, and it was a thrill here today when Michelle and I were doing our brief before the hearing. We were out there right outside the barn where the draft horses are. What a change of scenery from the swamp back in D.C. Just looking out there at the beautiful landscape there. What is often left out of this story, though, is that these smaller and less well-known parks, these small businesses, this rich history draws visitors from all around the world as well. And I think about our parks in our country as being kind of the department of first impressions. Oftentimes, when international visitors come to the United States, and their first experience will be in one of our parks. And this gets back, I think, the importance of the deferred maintenance to make sure everybody's experience here, that first impression, is a positive one. Your expertise is a Southwest region here. Could you give me an idea of how the sites like Grand Corps, how they draw visitors into towns like Deer Lodge, and how important is that play in the larger Montana tourism economy?
Well, Grand Corps offers a culture that you can't find in most national parks at all. And it is a way of life that most people are not exposed to. So that in itself is a draw. And then when we have our international people coming, they find that authentic heritage is a big draw. And so all of this brings in people from not only all over the states, but international tourists. And they are experience this, they leave their money as they pass through, as you've heard in the restaurants and in our other attractions. They also go back with word of mouth that is really huge for bringing more people in. And quite often they'll say, we found this little gem hidden in the corner of Montana. So we find that word of mouth is huge in spreading the word and consequently bringing in more economic development there, economic revenue.
In today's society with these word of mouth, oftentimes I think is social media, and I think we've seen examples with the Find Your Park initiative, that hashtag Every Kid Outdoors. I'd like just to maybe have and we'll kind of open this up to any of the witnesses here, maybe Ms. Van, thinking about how might we use social media to promote a site like Grand Course.
Well, our social media, we have, they have events that people are excited about. They like to post their pictures. Pumpkin Sunday, they want to post the pictures of all the fun they're having here. Roping, the little wooden cow over there. So right away, people are already excited and want to post on that. We have things going up on YouTube that will capture some of this. We have the branding that is exciting. Some of us have a hard time with it. We know it's part of culture. But all of that is so educational and so mind-boggling to some people that go get a hamburger at McDonald's. They don't see the backside of things. So all of that with social media will help, and it's along with Facebook and Twitter, Instagram, the photos going up on Snapchat. So it's out there, and we just need to keep that on the forefront, I think.
Does it work? You probably have a thought on that, I'm guessing.
I do. Social media and digital marketing are very foundational to how we market KOA. And a couple suggestions I would have. One plays into influencer strategy. So it's one thing to have a Facebook presence or an Instagram blast out yourself, but it's more impactful to engage people on these national parks, invite these people that have audiences of their own. So if you just hope for it to organically happen, there's some of that and there's some success stories, but we're very thoughtful about our engagement with specific influencers, whether that be someone that's targeting a family, a mom blogger target, or something in the diversity space, for example, that we get them onto our campgrounds to experience that, and then they're sharing it to a much wider audience. The other thing I would add with social media is that Facebook, Instagram in particular, are so sophisticated in the way you can target. So we can get our message, and we can get very specific about which zip codes we want to hit, which interests these people have based on what they post on, other pages that they like. And so you can have a very sophisticated strategy of advertising within social media. It's not just about posting, it's about your digital marketing strategy to get, they look like organic posts, but they're essentially ads in front of people. And so you could be targeting the region, you could be targeting certain areas of the country about specific locations to drive that awareness.
Go ahead and keep the microphone. I'll try to project. You can keep the mic. So these influencers you're talking about, I think just for the benefit of those who may not be in that world watching that, where you have Instagram sites that are primarily having a travel experience, that's all they do. They travel and they post their experience. People follow that. and they want to mimic that experience they had, particularly talk about the millennials, which is such a big part of the demographic as we think about where we could target. Could you talk a little more about, we might specifically talk about this park? What influences you look at? Are there some particular influence you might think about? You don't have to give me specifics, but you probably have some ideas in mind. We work a partnership thinking about with the Southwest Montana development, with our commissioners, with the park here. We might want to bring them here on the post on Instagram, Facebook, and that has ignited some significant shift in park visitation in other places around this country. I mean, remarkable results. I'm just thinking more about how we might do that, because it's a fairly cost-effective way to market.
Yeah, it's very cost effective. So there was a lot of talk earlier about word of mouth marketing.
Yeah.
Really, it's about word of mouse marketing in today's world. And so people, and there's a lot of stats around it, how they're influenced to travel based on what they see friends and family posting. They're even more so influenced by people they trust online. So that, retail companies use this all the time. They send their clothes to fashion bloggers that post images of them in these outfits. They cultivate these communities of people that follow and trust their advice, and then they order that product. So it's similar in travel. It's a really big deal, and I think we could take more advantage of that within the park system. So a place like this, if you were asking for my suggestions top of mind, it would definitely play into the family target. I talked about it. I think the millennial family is very important. Millennial parents are very interested in educating their children. They want to provide them unique experiences. They want to get them outdoors. And so if you can create environments where you're bringing some of these social media influencers that have audiences of families, mothers that are watching them of young children, and you're bringing them here with their children, they're getting that educational experience. They're seeing all of the unique things that Grant Course has to offer. They're going to write stories about that on their blogs. They're going to post pictures of that on Instagram. And these people have hundreds of thousands of followers that then they bookmark that, and that becomes on their bucket list. And we do this every day, and I think it's how you can get very targeted for very, very little money in investment.
Right. So you have a facility here, you mentioned, right?
We do.
Yeah. And so as you think about, if you were going to market for the Grant Course KOA campground here, are there some influences that come to mind as you think about that, both domestic and perhaps even internationally?
Mm-hmm.
And how we might, in developing a strategy here of that stop, Yellowstone and Glacier kind of going to be some anchor locations. We can use that to our advantage, figure out ways of making that trek, how to make sure they spend not just a bathroom break here, but how do we get them here into town and have an experience here. This becomes a high priority part of their travel experience, and not just a place to take a stretch break.
Yeah, the other trend is FOMO, the fear of missing out. So if they feel that something's happening here, that they came all this way to Montana and Wyoming, and then they drove right by it, and you're missing out. And your messaging can be structured around that, and this can be very targeted in advertising through geo-targeting. So you can hit somebody when they're in Butte, and they're everyone's on their phone. I just got off a road trip with my family. I sat on my phone half the time while my husband was driving. And I was getting ads for things happening in Colorado as we were driving through Colorado. You can be hitting people with those ads that they're missing out on real, true, authentic Western experience. Just a stop down the road. So if I'm working to your question, the KOA here, I am drawing that camper base here because there's all these things to do in the area. So we find people choose campground locations based off location. And so you have to sell them what there is to do here. A lot of ways to do that is not just show it, but to really show it authentically, and people, not just a billboard, but billboards are very important, but really show what's happening behind that. So whether you're doing it online, on the billboard, or in a magazine ad, that they're feeling like they're missing out on something and they have to stop.
Any other comments, thoughts? Jackie, you thought on that too, or Chip?
Yeah, I would agree, and I love the FOMO. I think that's absolutely accurate. The other thing which happens a lot in Deer Lodge, Facebook is definitely a media that's heavily used for people to communicate about events. And I notice we'll post something on our Facebook page, and then the Deer Lodge Classifieds will post it on their page, and then the Chamber of Commerce will post it on their page. So sometimes that reposting actually builds that FOMO excitement of, why are all these people talking about this event? So, and I did see the announcement for this hearing posted several times yesterday on our Facebook page and Facebook for Geologic Classified, so.
The National Park Service has social media accounts that are both handled nationally as well as also locally. And nationally, our DC office works to highlight lesser visited parks. But perhaps more directly to your question is what we also have is some of the larger parks are actually stepping up to market the less visited parks. Grand Teton actually has Wyoming Wednesday, where every Wednesday they use their social media to be able to highlight places around the state of Wyoming to inform people of. So I think it's, and we also, many parks, just as Jackie was saying, work to get expertise, such as what Toby talks about, to be able to try to develop a social media marketing plan and be able to identify what's appropriate for the National Park Service to do, what's appropriate for private businesses to do, but how you can go about coordinating your social media activities so that you're amplifying it in a strategic way.
So Jackie, we need to go talk to Jeff Mao and Cam Shaw. We're gonna have Montana Monday. How's that?
Great idea.
So Cam Shaw is the superintendent of Yellowstone National Park and Jeff Mao of Glacier National Park, for those who may not know those names. The question about cost and kind of return on investment. As some of you know, I spent most of my career in the private sector. As politics is still a new thing for me. And marketing was always such an important part of any business. If you're not selling, you're not moving your business forward and keeping the lights on. Thinking about the relative cost, where as you think about marketing budgets, where it's always tight budgets, there's never a lot of excess dollars floating around in this world. What do you think would be the most effective use of marketing? And then maybe it's back on the social media side here in terms of the greatest return on investment for marketing spend.
Sure.
We're very digitally or data driven in my business, and so we track everything. We've transitioned most of our money out of TV into digital. We can return $22 per dollar spent on a digital ad, and that's not necessarily, I mean, that can exist within social media, but that could be standard billboard ads that you may see while you're navigating the site, or search advertising is probably the most efficient and effective way we can market our business, and you have to be top of the fold. You have to be the first one or two, and sometimes we see upwards of $27 of return based off an investment in that area.
For $1.
For $1. And so as you are, it's very based off keywords. You have to be in front of what you think people are searching, and I think there's a big opportunity to market places like this and others across the country if you're focused on road trips. And people are looking at Yellowstone, so you buy Yellowstone keywords to promote Grand Course. Because they're already going to Yellowstone, so they're searching all these things to do in Yellowstone, but you're serving them ads, and they're like, oh yeah, we're gonna drive right by there. And you can return, and that we find our most return comes from digital ads.
I find that it's really hard to measure the other side of advertising. Digital is cost effective, but you also find that you have a lot of people that like to read while they're in the car. So I find it's nice to have both the digital and like a brochure saying coming to Grand Course, because it's not necessarily on their radar as if they're going through, say, Yellowstone. But if they see the brochure, they say, oh, yeah, let's keep this on our radar and let's pass through on that. So I think you need a variety of ways of marketing your attractions.
If you may.
Yeah, please.
And just to build on that and give credit to Jeff up at Glacier is that many national parks hand out a park newspaper. Well, Glacier dedicates a page in their park newspaper to Grand Course. So people visiting there, when they come through the entrance gate, they get something they can read in the car about Grand Course.
That's great.
How about Cam?
We'll have a conversation.
Cam's a dear friend. I was going to try to get a few days out in the backcountry Yellowstone. In fact, in August, we want to get some time together off the beaten path there in Yellowstone this summer, but it's not going to work out my schedule. Maybe next year. Well, that's it. Thanks for that discussion and that thought. I just, as I spending time here, and you think about the off the beaten path, and again, that word authentic, I think was used, the genuineness of this experience, and the lack of crowds, and so forth is something I think people yearn for. They come to Montana to get away from the traffic and away from the urban kind of environment. And I think you've got something very, very special here. I've got a question back for Ms. O'Rourke. KOA, like the National Park Service, manages a lot of individual units across the U.S., your Alaska and Maine, as well as in Canada, and of course your campground here in Deer Lodge. Just like the Park Service or really any business with retail presence, some sites are just getting more popular than others. What does KOA do, or if you're able to share, how you identify new sites for your portfolio as you look at potential visitation or even proximity to a national park unit is something you might look at as you think about expansion?
Thank you. Yes, as I said, we have 520 locations across the country. Each of our franchised properties, which is the majority of that, is guaranteed a territory. So in some ways that can restrict our ability to oversaturate one particular area. For example, the Yellowstone parks we were talking about earlier, and in Glacier, any national park campground is very, very busy and popular because there are people traveling to those parks, so naturally they're camping outside the parks. Our strategy is to put as many KOAs around those parks as possible, and a lot of our owners are adding additional locations because it's within a territory. You can't just add another one. They're guaranteed a certain territory. But other ways we look to expand, our business grew up on highways and byways, the interstate system. We actually have 3 types of campgrounds that were segmented: the resort destinations, holiday locations, which are base camps to explore, and journey parks. And journey parks are all about convenience for that traveler. So we do have some campgrounds that are more popular based off their location, but each of our campgrounds serve some sort of purpose. It could be aiding that traveler. And so if I'm equating that to the park system, every park has there's certain crown jewels, and there's other parks that maybe serve a different purpose. They're all meeting that need of someone exploring our heritage, and they can be promoted on, just like that road trip, again, going back to that. So just as a journey campground is serving someone traveling, so could this campground be a great stop for an afternoon while they're going to maybe their ultimate destination in Glacier and make their state of the park campgrounds there. So I don't know if that answered your questions, but absolutely it's driven by tourism markets, it's driven by national parks, urban centers. We've got campgrounds outside of major cities as people looking to get outside the city. And that's how our expansion strategy goes.
Mr. Jenkins, you're director of the entire Intermountain region. You've spent years in the Park Service. Thank you for your service. Could you share some of the success stories that might come to mind where you've seen maybe smaller parks, where they've been able to drive some increase in visitation, increase in visibility, and perhaps they're parks within your territory, or stories you've heard about other parks around the country that once were kind of off the beaten path and are now increasing their numbers?
Sure. First, what I would say is that kind of every place where there's an example of successfully marketing the opportunity with a lesser known park, it pretty much is universally as a result of a partnership or partnerships. Work, collaboration with local communities, collaboration with local businesses, collaboration with state organizations. It's not something that we can do alone, and part of it is leveraging resources to be able to do that. I think a nice example that's going on is actually the Big Hole National Battlefield, where the park is continuing to grow the relationship with the Nez Perce tribe. Many people, both from the United States and from around the world, are fascinated about tribal history and culture. and the working relationship at the Big Hole and also the other Nez Perce sites where the tribe is willing to come in and do cultural demonstrations where they're able to do drumming and singing, language programs. Again, it goes to that authenticity. It's the real thing, and it's not, and it's done by the people. It's their heritage telling their story. I think that that's part of what's attractive about here at Grand Cours. It's the real heritage. In addition, also at Nez Perce, I think we're also working with local businesses about how they can play a role in with commercial tours and with tying in with other local businesses in terms of being able to have crafts that are also being sold. So that's one example. I think a different place and a little bit of a different angle is Little Bighorn, where we are seeing a change in visitation. We are seeing people showing up with larger vehicles, particularly trailers. And within the existing footprint that we have is that, just being able to be a welcoming place as part of our deferred maintenance, we need to modernize the parking lot so that we can reconfigure within the existing footprint so that we can accommodate people being able to come with with the projected way that they're going to be visiting there. And so, working with funding that comes from Congress in order to be able to make the infrastructure changes that we're making at those parks. Does that help?
It does, yeah.
It's struck to think about our history in this country is still relatively new
Yes.
compared to a lot of the world. And to use that Nez Perce example or the cowboy experience here, it's not that far removed. In fact, I had dinner with an 83-year-old rancher in Carbon County here earlier this week. And he's talking about his grandfather, which he has direct memories of, when he came to Montana pre-statehood. And you think about it, that was his grandpa. And he still has first-hand memories of that, and we have a chance to preserve that, right? And share that. I want to talk about thinking about veteran populations. When I think about some of these targeted groups we can have in terms of driving of tourism. Last year there was a bill that I sponsored called the Every Kid Outdoors Act. We talked a little about the importance there in the demographic of millennials and so forth. It helps getting kids, out of the house, indoor national parks. I should say the students, not kids. I'm a father here, to slip there. I was happy to see that that was signed into law by the president as part of this lands package that we passed earlier this year, a historic lands package. This year we're working on increasing veterans' access to our parks. It's a bill. It's called the Accelerating Veterans Recovery Outdoors Act. In Montana we have a lot of wounded warrior programs, bringing veterans here who have suffered injuries on the battlefield and come out here. We take them fly fishing, we take them hunting. There's a lot of great stories of where they've experienced the Montana way of life and part of their healing process. This bill will not only help get veterans into our parks, but also help again with recovery and treatment from service-related injuries. Mr. Jenkins, could you talk a bit how the Park Service is targeting groups like veterans, like students, to expand vegetation in parks? You shared a little bit earlier about every kid outdoors, and particularly how that applies to our less visited parks.
Sure. First of all, thank you for the support of the Every Kid's Outdoors Act. I mean, that's been in the Every Kid in the Park program. In the first 4 years of existence, there were over 600,000 fourth graders that participated in that program. That is a remarkable success, and the fact that that program was authorized to continue into the future gives us and the BLM and the Fish and Wildlife Service and the Forest Service a very powerful tool to work with our partners for that. And programs like that are important both for the passes, also for it incentivizes nonprofit organizations like the National Park Foundation, others, to provide grants to work with educators and schools so that we bring fourth graders to parks, and then as a part of their school visit, they get an Every Kid Outdoors pass. So we're leveraging a lot of different resources in order to be able to do that. Hopefully then the kid has, the student, it goes back from their fourth grade class trip, takes their pass home, and that incentivizes the whole family then to be able to come and visit a park or multiple parks. In terms of working with our military, both active and veterans, It's one of the angles is I think this is
Maybe it's off the battery, let's see here.
my voice carries.
Okay.
It's never been accused. Yep, never been accused of not caring. As Toby pointed out, part of it working in the diversity space, and one of the most diverse organizations in this country is the military. And so there's actually, the Park Service is viewing that as kind of double duty, both honoring the service of working with those who are active duty and veterans, but it's also an enormous opportunity for us to be able to connect with diverse audiences and diverse organizations. We work with a variety of different partner organizations to host veterans to be able to come in a variety of different ways, and we are experimenting and piloting different programs, particularly around helping veterans heal and move to post-military service careers. So for example, I'll actually use my day job. I'm superintendent at Mount Rainier National Park. We work with an organization called Mission Continues, where for the last several years, the Mission Continues leadership comes to Mount Rainier and they spend 4 or 5 days doing a combination of service projects where they are working together and doing team building, and then around the campfire and over evenings they're doing strategic planning for their organization about how they can bring other vets to be able to be engaged. So.
Well, thanks. I think we can't underestimate the power of that experience could
Yes.
be for a veteran. We had a young Green Beret from Montana that was nearly killed in action in March in Afghanistan. I visited him at Walter Reed. He's from Northwest Montana. We'll keep it anonymous here because he's a special ops. But I had a chance. He didn't think he'd walk again. He got out of Walter Reed and was able to push him in a wheelchair around the Capitol here earlier this year so he could see it. And then fast forward, I was at Fort Carson a couple weeks ago shooting on their long-range 1,000-meter targets. And guess who showed up to shoot with me? This young Green Beret from Montana. And part of the healing process, we got him set up to do a Wounded Warrior elk hunt here this fall. And he was so excited, part of it. On the day when we lost one of our key Green Berets on July 13th, a 40-year-old gentleman, 3 children, tragically killed, who was a mentor to all these Green Berets. And then on a really dark day, that text I sent him saying, we'd like to go elk hunting in Montana. Now they're going to come, of course, with a Wounded Warrior kind of project. Anyway, it's a really important part, I guess. It's just one more story to that. Well, we're going to move towards a conclusion here. Before we close, I'd like to ask one more question to each of you. And we've discussed a lot of different thoughts, throw some ideas out there about ways to perhaps cost-effectively improve traffic and visibility here to our place like Grand Course. Here's the question. If you were to leave one suggestion for Congress, for the administration, I'm sorry, it can only be one. Pertaining to, we're just interested Montanans in general. What would you want to see done that might help boost visitation at a site like Grand Course? And anything you'd like to see done specifically? And we're going to open up to each of you who wants to go first. And Jack, you get to have a word on this as well, okay, as our honorary 5th member of the panel here. So if anybody wants to start that out, let me know.
I'll start.
Awesome.
Well, I like the idea that we will continue our marketing and really focusing on this National Historic Site. I would like to find a way to get more, and this goes against the new way, but the traditional, I'd like to have some brochures. We have brochure exchanges. We have our Glacier Park, National Park. I feel if we can get Grand Course Ranch in there, this is right in between, it's right on the trail, it's in their hands. I think if we can get more brochures, we'll get them out to all our area and our neighboring areas. So I would like to be able to do that.
Thank you, and I'd like to kind of play on that too. I'm old-fashioned, you might say. I don't have a cell phone. I don't have cell phone. smartphone. I don't have cell service at my house, so I don't have a smartphone. I do have a flip phone. Brochures are great. I learned a lot about what social media has to do. I'm not on Facebook and all that, but I did learn a lot from Ms. O'Rourke about how good of a advertising factor that is. I want to let you know that we, as a county, we are in cooperation with the city and the Chamber of Commerce. We do have a individual that's hired jointly that we all have that is just for that purpose of trying to bring anything of importance or bring tourism in or anything into the county in general, and also with the city and the chamber. But we're not only looking at Deer Lodge, we're also looking at our little rural communities, like Abando, Helmville, the smaller ones. If they have anything that they're doing, trying to get it out and advertised through this individual. I know she uses social media. And thank you very much for having me.
Thanks, Commissioner. Appreciate it.
Thank you. I'm struggling. I have two there on one side, so I'm just trying to decide what.
You can share too.
Okay, great. So the first one I would just offer is some brand partnerships representing private industry here. And we get, discussions a lot with the Interior Department about private investment in parks or et cetera, but I'd love to extend that discussion. Some things Chip talked about made me think about ways that we could better partner together for purposes of marketing, because that drives my business and drives visitation to each of these individual locations. And before the hearing, he had shared that the park system can't actually buy ads, so that ROI discussion we had, I did not know, but I do know now that you can't actually invest money into those digital ads, but I can. And I can do that to the benefit of both of us. So I think that there's something to be explored there. But the thing I wanted to talk about, again, we talked about children and we talked about veterans, and I touched briefly in my statement about minorities. I think that that's a huge area of opportunity nationally for targeting and being more inclusive and focusing on bringing minority demographics to the outdoors and to our national parks, whether it's the large parks or the small parks. And there's a lot of work to do, and within my own business, we are tackling this as well. We're having a inclusion and camping summit at the Presidio, another national park, in September, where we're bringing together leaders from campground organizations to have discussions specifically about inclusion, because we are learning, while the numbers are showing there's steady progress, there's so much work to do. There was studies done several years ago out of Wyoming that showed that, for example, this study looked at African American demographic that said they did not feel welcome in the national parks. Other things coming out of that research was showing that among Hispanic or African American, they didn't even know about the national parks. And so that's something we work on in our business, and I think that can be elevated. That plays into being inclusive in your marketing. That plays into working specific outreach programs with these influencer groups. That's how we're starting right now, that I talked about earlier. There's a lot of activist groups that have been formed across the board. It's not just people of color communities, it's also LGBTQ and handicap and women as well. So I think there's a lot of work that can be done there, and it's not just marketing to market, it's true authentic engagement, and that's where we're shifting as a brand, and I think the Parks Service could do that as well, because then it seems more welcoming and more real. And then the third part up to that is also representation in park rangers and in staff. So on my side, I want to look at how I can increase numbers of franchisees from people of color communities and other underrepresented groups. And I think some national parks have made efforts and inroads to increase diversity, not just among color, but also with women. And I think that that's important to continue, because when that face is played back to the visitor, they feel welcome there, and that's going to increase visitation. So I think that's a huge initiative that the outdoors needs to embrace across the board, and it's private industry as well as public.
You get the last word. Senator, thank you for your work on focusing on the deferred maintenance, the maintenance backlog. And that's what I would say, is that it is continuing the effort. We want making progress on deferred maintenance is fundamental to world-class visitor experience. And We want people to have a world-class experience from Glacier to Grand Cours. And Congress's continued focus on helping us to address the maintenance backlog will get us there.
Thank you for the last word. Senator, the one thing I would say that would make a difference is just what you're doing here today. You have made a conscious decision to come to a lesser-known park and have a public event. And I would say in my tenure of 6 years here, this is the first elected representative that has ever visited Grand Cours Ranch. So I applaud you, and I invite you to share that to your colleagues. Lesser-known parks are in every state in the country, and it's common and very easy to think, I'm going to go to Yellowstone, I'm going to go to Yosemite as my backdrop for my event, or for citizenship ceremony, or for hosting some activity, or even going to an event. It's not common that us lesser-known parks are thought of, and I appreciate the fact that you're willing to do that, because we are absolutely willing to host events like this.
Well, thank you. I think too, I think Ms. O'Rourke, your opening testimony, you talked about, I think, 150-mile kind of a radius where folks are going. I think of my own hometown of Bozeman, which is the fastest growing micropolitan in America now. It's defined as 50,000 people with us. We're nearly at 50,000 people in Bozeman. All the folks who are in there, you're exactly right on that radius, 2 hours for that family that's looking for something to do on a weekend to kind of get off the beaten path. And so there's probably some opportunities right here in our backyard that we have around us, which some I jotted down as well. You drive another 500 people, that makes a dent, or 1,000, a couple thousand here on 26,000 visitors a year here. Well, thank you. I really appreciate witnesses here for your testimony and your thoughts. And Jackie, for all you did here to make this happen today. Thanks to our audience as well that was here to see what it's like. Senator Hearing, it's a little more relaxed here in Washington. In some ways, this is the way government works, and it should work that way. I find that we can bring DC out here to Montana. We have a discussion here that we've got a number of to-dos that hopefully will drive the end game here, which is increasing number of visitors coming to Grand Cours, helping out Powell County, Deer Lodge, and these communities around here. I want to thank witnesses for your time, your testimony today. The hearing record will be open for 2 weeks. This hearing is now adjourned.